Shy girl saves a rich cowboy's life after everyone ignored the warning signs. Emotional Wild West. The town, small and somewhat forgotten, was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, and nothing happened without someone noticing. Yet in the corner of this sleepy town, life moved at its own slow, deliberate pace, and the people were used to their ordinary routines. Among them was Clara, a young woman whose presence was quiet but meaningful in subtle ways. She was not like most townsfolk who sought attention or gossip. She preferred to observe rather than participate, to listen rather than speak. She worked at the small general store on Main Street, a humble shop with wooden shelves lined with sacks of flour, jars of pickles, barrels of dried beans, and the occasional shiny trinket brought in by wandering traders. Clara's days followed a predictable rhythm, but she found comfort in this simplicity. She greeted the few customers who entered with a soft smile, helped Mrs. Thompson from next door carry groceries, and kept track of the town's small happenings with careful attention. People often overlooked her because of her shy nature. She had soft brown eyes that seemed to notice everything, yet few dared to meet them for long, as if they could see their secrets reflected there. Her hair, always tied neatly, and her modest clothing made her blend easily into the background. But Clara's quiet demeanor was deceptive. Beneath it was a mind that paid attention to details, a heart that cared deeply, and a courage she had yet to fully discover. That morning, as Clara swept the wooden floor of the store, the sound of hooves struck her attention. She looked up just as a tall, broad-shouldered man rode slowly down Main Street. His horse was sleek and well-groomed, and the rider wore a wide-brimmed hat that shaded most of his face. From the way he carried himself, it was clear he was someone used to commanding respect. Ethan Parker, as she would soon learn, had arrived in Dry Creek with a reputation that preceded him. He was a wealthy cowboy, owning large herds and often dealing in trades that involved significant sums of money. His boots were polished, his coat was new, and yet there was something in his posture that suggested a restless mind beneath the composed exterior. Clara, ever observant, noticed the subtle signs almost immediately. There was a stiffness in the way Ethan held the reins, a slight flinch as the horse jolted over uneven ground, and a distracted look in his eyes that suggested he was preoccupied with matters far away from Dry Creek. Most townspeople, however, were too enchanted by his appearance and the wealth he represented to notice anything unusual. They waved eagerly, shouted greetings, and speculated about who he might be and what he had brought to the town. Children ran alongside his horse for a few yards, hoping for a coin or a pat on the head, and shopkeepers called out invitations to dinner or drinks. Everyone seemed to see him as a welcomed guest, someone who would bring excitement to their otherwise ordinary lives. But Clara's instincts told her a different story. She watched Ethan as he dismounted, noticing that he shifted his weight as if favoring one leg. His fingers were slightly bruised, and his eyes darted nervously toward the horizon several times, as if he were expecting something, or someone. She felt a strange chill run down her spine, though she could not explain why. Something about the way he moved, the subtle tension in his expression, and the almost imperceptible signs of unease convinced her that trouble might be closer than anyone realized. Despite her hesitation, Clara felt compelled to pay attention. She did not rush forward or speak out immediately. Her nature was too shy for that. Instead, she returned to her sweeping, quietly observing the movements of Ethan from the corner of her eye. She noted how he interacted with the townsfolk, polite but distant, courteous but detached. When a child accidentally bumped into him, he smiled politely, but his eyes showed impatience and worry. When the storekeeper next door offered him a seat for breakfast, he declined, mumbling something about needing to check on his horse. These small behaviors, though easily overlooked by others, did not escape Clara's careful attention. Clara's mind began to wonder why a man with everything—wealth, influence, and charm—would seem so uneasy in a small town where nothing dangerous usually happened. She remembered stories from her own childhood about travelers who had faced bandits on lonely roads or had accidents with wild animals. While she had never experienced anything so dramatic herself, she had learned to trust her instincts. Something about Ethan's presence made her alert. Something about him told her that his life might be more fragile than the townspeople realized. As the day went on, Clara continued her quiet observations. She noticed how Ethan would occasionally glance behind him, as if he feared someone was following. She saw the subtle scratches on his coat and the slight swelling on his knuckles. He ate little at the saloon, drinking water instead of coffee, and often excused himself to check his horse. Each small detail reinforced Clara's growing suspicion that Ethan was in a delicate situation, one that others were failing to recognize. The town's excitement, however, was unrelenting. Merchants and farmers came to shake his hand, children ran errands for him, and the saloon buzzed with speculation about his wealth and adventures. No one seemed to notice the tension in his shoulders or the way he avoided lingering too long in one place. Clara felt a pang of frustration. She wanted to warn someone, to make them see what she saw, but she was painfully aware of her shy nature. When she tried to speak up to a few of the shopkeepers, her voice barely rose above a whisper, and they simply smiled, dismissed her, or assumed she was overthinking. By afternoon, Clara's curiosity had turned into quiet vigilance. She moved about the store, arranging goods, but never letting her eyes stray far from Ethan. She mentally cataloged his movements, which streets he took, where he went, and how he interacted with others. She realized that if something dangerous were to happen, she might be the only one prepared to notice it before it was too late. Though she wished she could be braver, Clara accepted that her role was to watch, to pay attention, and to act carefully when the moment demanded. As the sun began to dip behind the distant hills, casting long shadows across Dry Creek, Clara felt a strange mix of anticipation and anxiety. She sensed that this quiet town, which she had always considered safe and predictable, was about to be the stage for something significant. Ethan Parker, the wealthy cowboy who seemed confident and untouchable to everyone else, was facing dangers that no one yet understood. And Clara, the shy girl who kept to herself, would soon discover that her quiet strength and careful observation might make all the difference. That evening, as she closed the store and prepared to walk home, Clara caught one last glimpse of Ethan. He was standing near his horse, staring at the horizon with a distant expression, unaware of the danger that lingered nearby. Clara took a deep breath, feeling a strange sense of resolve. She knew she would have to step beyond her shyness at some point, but for now she would remain the quiet observer, watching carefully, learning everything she could, and waiting for the moment when courage would be required. For Clara, this was just the beginning. The day had started like any other, quiet and ordinary, but now it held the promise of adventure, responsibility, and perhaps a chance to prove that even the most unnoticed person could change the course of events in the Wild West. The town of Dry Creek, unaware of the challenges approaching, continued its slow rhythm, while Clara's heart beat a little faster with anticipation. She was ready, even if no one else realized it yet, to face whatever came next. The next morning in Dry Creek began with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of dust and pine through the streets. Clara woke early, as she always did, preparing herself for another day at the general store. Even though her work was simple, her mind was far from idle. She could not stop thinking about Ethan Parker, the wealthy cowboy who had arrived in town the previous day. Something about him lingered in her thoughts, not his wealth, not his charm, but the quiet unease that had immediately caught her attention. Clara knew that wealth and confidence often hid deeper struggles, and she worried that no one in the town could see what she saw. When Clara opened the store, the morning sunlight spilled through the windows, illuminating the wooden floorboards and dust motes floating lazily in the air. She arranged jars of preserves on the shelves, neatly stacked sacks of flour, and baskets of fresh vegetables. Her hands moved carefully, but her eyes never left the street. She hoped to catch another glimpse of Ethan before he went about his business. Sure enough, by mid-morning, the sound of hooves signaled his approach. Ethan rode slowly into town, but this time, Clara noticed a slight limp as he guided his horse. His hand touched the injured leg unconsciously, a grimace crossing his face. Most townsfolk remained oblivious. They cheered his arrival, waved eagerly, and tried to engage him in conversation. Ethan smiled politely, tipped his hat, and greeted everyone, but his eyes revealed fatigue and tension. He spoke briefly to a few shopkeepers and even stopped by the saloon, but he remained distant, checking his surroundings as if expecting trouble. Clara's heart tightened as she observed him. The signs were becoming more pronounced. His cautious movements, the small scratches on his hands, the occasional uneasy glance over his shoulder. Each detail told her that Ethan was facing something dangerous, something that the cheerful townsfolk could not, or would not see. Clara knew she had to act carefully. She could not confront Ethan directly yet, for fear of startling him or drawing attention to herself. Instead, she decided to track his movements quietly, paying close attention to every detail of his routine. She noted which paths he took, the direction of his glances, and the moments when he appeared nervous or distracted. It was becoming clear to Clara that whatever was troubling Ethan was not a minor concern. She felt a mix of anxiety and determination, an urge to warn him and protect him, but also the familiar fear that came with stepping out of her comfort zone. Throughout the morning, several strange incidents occurred, all of which Clara noticed immediately. Ethan's horse shied at a sudden noise near the stables, nearly throwing him off. A delivery wagon on the main road rolled too close to him, forcing him to jump aside to avoid being struck. Each time, townsfolk laughed or dismissed the events as bad luck, while Ethan's polite smiles masked his growing concern. Clara observed silently, her heart racing. She wanted to speak up, to insist that people take note, but her timid voice had always made her hesitant. Still, she could not ignore what she saw. By noon, Clara had decided to follow Ethan discreetly. She closed the store for a short while, stepping out quietly and keeping to the shadows. She trailed him through side streets and across the town square, careful not to be noticed. Her mind raced with possibilities. What if he was being followed? What if someone intended to harm him? Clara had grown up hearing stories of bandits and danger in the open plains, and the signs Ethan displayed fit the pattern of someone who might soon be in serious trouble. She felt a strange combination of fear and responsibility, realizing that she could be the only one who could notice and respond in time. Ethan stopped at the edge of town near a small creek, dismounting to check the water for his horse and to rest for a moment. Clara crouched behind a fence, her eyes never leaving him. She noticed a fresh scratch on his arm and a small bruise forming on his hand. He paused, glanced around, and then checked the saddle and the reins carefully. Clara's heart pounded. The danger she sensed was getting closer, but she had no way of knowing exactly what form it would take. The thought of someone trying to hurt him, someone others ignored, made her resolve stronger. She needed to remain vigilant. Later that afternoon, Clara returned to the store but kept her eyes on the street, noting any unusual figures or movements. A group of strangers had arrived in the outskirts of town, men she did not recognize. They lingered near the edge of the horizon, observing rather than engaging. Clara's instincts told her they were connected to the danger surrounding Ethan. While the townspeople continued their chatter and excitement, she began taking mental notes of the men's clothing, their positions, and the way they moved. Each detail was recorded in her memory, forming a careful picture of a possible threat. Clara attempted to alert a few townsfolk again. She approached the storekeeper, Mr. Hawkins, and quietly suggested he keep an eye on Ethan, that the stranger might be in trouble. But her words, gentle and hesitant, were met with polite smiles and dismissive nods. "Oh, Clara, you worry too much," Mr. Hawkins said kindly. "Ethan Parker is a strong man. He can handle himself." Clara felt frustration rise within her. She knew she could not convince anyone else, at least not yet. The town's excitement and fascination with Ethan's wealth blinded them to the subtle signs she had noticed. Still, she could not give up. She resolved to continue observing, to protect him in whatever small ways she could, even if no one else took her seriously. By late afternoon, Clara had noticed that Ethan's tension seemed to increase. He checked his surroundings constantly, his eyes scanning for movement that might signal danger. At the saloon, he remained polite but kept his interactions brief, returning frequently to his horse to ensure it was safe. Clara realized he was a man who was not used to being vulnerable, someone who carried the weight of responsibility heavily. Yet beneath the surface of his calm exterior, there was a vulnerability that Clara alone seemed to recognize. She felt an unexpected surge of empathy, wishing she could do more to ease his burden, even though she was just a quiet girl from the general store. As evening approached, Clara followed Ethan again, this time along a narrow path leading out of town toward the nearby hills. The sunlight was fading, casting long shadows that danced across the dusty ground. Clara remained hidden, careful not to make a sound. She noticed a sudden movement in the distance, figures emerging from the hills, moving with purpose. Her heart raced as she realized that the danger she had sensed all day was real and drawing closer. She could see the bandits now, their intentions clear, and fear for Ethan surged through her. This was the moment she had anticipated, the moment when observation alone would no longer be enough. She would need to act. Clara stayed in the shadows, watching as Ethan unknowingly moved toward the ambush. He was unaware of the danger lurking just beyond the hill, confident in the town's safety and in his own strength. Clara's mind raced with plans. How could she warn him without startling him? How could she divert the bandits long enough for him to escape? She realized that her courage would soon be tested. For the first time, she understood that being shy did not mean being powerless. Her careful observation, her attention to detail, and her quiet strength could make all the difference in the outcome of the day. As night fell over Dry Creek, Clara returned to her home with a mix of anxiety and determination. She knew she could not sleep, not while Ethan's safety was at stake. She made preparations for the following day, thinking through every possible scenario. She organized a small bag with supplies, noting the paths he might take, the likely positions of the bandits, and her own strategies for intervention. Clara's mind was a whirlwind of plans and precautions, but beneath it all was a steady determination. She would not allow harm to come to Ethan while she could prevent it, even if no one else believed her warnings. Before closing her eyes for the night, Clara reflected on the events of the day. She had watched, observed, and recorded everything with precision, but she realized that her role was about to shift. Tomorrow, she would no longer be a passive observer. Tomorrow, she would need to step forward, to act with courage, and to face dangers she had only anticipated until now. And even though she was shy, even though her heart raced with anxiety at the thought of confronting danger, she knew she could do it. Clara's quiet nature had prepared her for this moment. Her patience, her observation, and her careful attention to detail had given her knowledge that no one else possessed. She was ready. In the darkness of her small room, Clara made a promise to herself. She would protect Ethan Parker, not for reward or recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. She understood that her actions could change the course of events in Dry Creek, and that realization filled her with a sense of purpose she had never known before. The town slept peacefully, unaware of the storm approaching, but Clara did not. She lay awake, listening to the distant sounds of the night, preparing herself for the challenges that tomorrow would bring. The following morning dawned clear and bright over Dry Creek, but there was an unusual tension in the air. Clara felt it the moment she stepped outside, the breeze carrying more than the usual scent of dust and pine. It carried a sense of anticipation, a quiet warning that something was about to happen. Her eyes scanned the streets as she made her way to the general store, her mind running over every detail she had observed about Ethan Parker, the wealthy cowboy who had unknowingly placed himself in potential danger. Clara had spent the past day and night replaying each movement, each glance, and each subtle sign of unease, and now she knew that the danger was closer than ever. By mid-morning, Clara noticed Ethan leaving the saloon after a brief breakfast, his posture tense and alert. He mounted his horse and rode out of town, heading toward the hills where he often checked on his herd. Clara, knowing she could not allow him to face possible danger alone, followed at a distance, keeping to the shadows and observing quietly. Her heart pounded with a mixture of fear and determination. The events of the past day had proven to her that something serious was unfolding, and she could not wait any longer. This was no longer a situation where observation alone would suffice. She would need to be ready to act. As Clara carefully followed Ethan, she noticed movement along the ridges ahead. Figures crouched and shifted among the rocks, their faces partly hidden, their intentions unclear but clearly deliberate. Clara's sharp eyes recognized the signs immediately. These were not ordinary travelers or hunters. They were bandits, planning something that could endanger Ethan's life. She crouched low behind a fence post, trying to keep a safe distance while assessing the situation. Her mind raced as she considered her options. The bandits were too many for her to confront directly, and Ethan was unaware of their presence. She would have to think creatively, relying on her intelligence and careful planning rather than strength. Ethan continued riding, unaware of the danger lurking in the hills. He seemed absorbed in his thoughts, scanning the horizon occasionally but failing to notice the bandits' movements. Clara felt a surge of fear. Every instinct in her body screamed that he was walking into a trap. Her careful observations over the past days had prepared her for this moment, but she still felt a pang of doubt. Could she intervene without being noticed? Could she distract the bandits long enough to give Ethan a chance to escape? Clara took a deep breath, steadying herself. She knew that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. She decided to move closer, using the rocks and sparse bushes for cover. Every step had to be deliberate, calculated, and silent. Clara's knowledge of the terrain, gained from countless hours exploring the edges of Dry Creek as a child, gave her an advantage. She could see paths that others might miss, hiding spots that offered both protection and visibility. Her heart raced as she inched closer to the bandits' positions, noting their numbers, their postures, and their focus on the path Ethan was taking. They had not yet noticed her, and she hoped it would remain that way. As she watched, Clara realized that the bandits were preparing to force Ethan's horse to stumble, creating a situation where he could be captured or injured. Panic rose within her, but she quickly forced herself to think clearly. She needed a plan, a clever distraction that would draw the bandits' attention without putting herself directly in harm's way. Her eyes scanned the surroundings, searching for anything that could help. She noticed a loose pile of rocks near the path, and an idea began to form. Carefully, she shifted one rock, then another, until she found the right position to create a small landslide that would divert the bandits' attention. Timing would be crucial. Clara had to wait until Ethan was close enough to the trap to take advantage of the distraction, but far enough that the bandits' focus would shift without noticing him. She crouched low, counting each moment, feeling the tension in her chest. She could hear the distant sound of Ethan's horse moving over the gravel, the steady rhythm of hooves that had become familiar to her over the past days. Her hands trembled slightly, but her determination remained strong. This was the moment she had prepared for. Suddenly, a bird took flight nearby, startling one of the bandits. Clara's heart skipped a beat, fearing it would reveal her position, but the figure quickly returned to focus. She adjusted her position and prepared to act. With a quick push, she dislodged the first rock, then another, creating a small cascade down the slope. The noise caught the bandits' attention immediately. Their heads turned, their eyes scanning the rocks, their focus momentarily diverted from Ethan. Clara felt a surge of hope. The distraction had worked. She knew she had bought him precious seconds, and now he needed to act. Ethan, unaware of the threat, continued along the path. Clara noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the reins tightly. She realized that he needed guidance, but she also understood that shouting could be dangerous, revealing her position to the bandits. Instead, she decided to make herself visible just enough to signal him subtly. Clara stepped out from her cover, waving her hand in a deliberate motion, hoping he would notice. Ethan glanced up, confusion flashing across his face, but he quickly understood that something was wrong. His eyes followed hers, and for the first time he realized that danger was near. The bandits, now distracted by the rocks and the noise, turned toward the slope, leaving a small opening for Ethan to maneuver. Clara's pulse raced as she watched him react. He urged his horse to the side, moving cautiously but quickly enough to avoid the potential trap. Her careful planning and observation had given him a chance, and for the first time, she felt a spark of confidence in her own ability. She was no longer just an observer, she was an active participant, shaping the events unfolding before her eyes. The bandits, realizing their initial plan was disrupted, began to regroup. Clara knew she needed to act again, to prevent them from recovering their advantage. She grabbed a larger rock and threw it down the path, creating a loud crash that drew their attention further away. The bandits shouted in frustration, their focus entirely on the noise. Ethan seized the moment, urging his horse forward, moving with a speed and precision that Clara had not seen before. Her heart swelled with a mixture of fear and relief. He was safe, for now. As Ethan rode past her hiding spot, he finally caught a clear glimpse of Clara. Recognition and surprise flashed across his face. He had seen her watching, seen her intervene, and understood in that instant that she had been warning him all along. Clara, still crouched low, felt a mix of relief and nervousness. She had succeeded in buying him time, but she knew the danger was not completely gone. The bandits were still nearby, and she would need to continue thinking quickly to ensure his safety. Clara followed at a safe distance as Ethan guided his horse through safer paths, carefully avoiding the areas where the bandits had been spotted. Her mind worked rapidly, analyzing every possible move the bandits could make, every potential path of escape, and every way she could assist without being discovered. She realized that her careful attention to detail over the past days had prepared her for this exact moment. Every observation, every note in her mind, every small detail she had noticed now contributed to a plan that could save a life. By the time the sun began to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the dusty hills, Ethan had managed to reach a safer area, temporarily out of the bandits' reach. He dismounted, breathing heavily, his eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. Clara stepped out from her hiding place, approaching cautiously. He looked at her, still stunned, and finally spoke, his voice a mixture of relief and awe. You saved me," he said, his words barely audible over the wind. Clara nodded, shy but firm, her eyes meeting his. "I had to," she replied softly. "I saw what was coming." For the first time, Ethan understood the depth of Clara's courage. Her quiet demeanor, her careful observation, and her willingness to act despite fear had saved his life. He realized that she had been warning him all along, and he felt a deep sense of gratitude and respect. Clara, though still shy, felt a newfound confidence. She had faced danger, made quick decisions, and acted with intelligence and bravery. The experience had changed her, showing her that even someone quiet and reserved could make a powerful difference when it mattered most. As evening fell, Clara and Ethan made their way back toward the edge of the hills, staying alert for any further threats. The bandits were still in the area, but their initial plan had failed, and they seemed hesitant to approach. Clara remained vigilant, guiding Ethan with subtle gestures and quiet signals. He followed her lead, trusting her instincts, and slowly they returned to the safety of the town. The streets of Dry Creek were quiet now, unaware of the close call that had occurred just beyond the hills. Clara felt a sense of relief wash over her, mixed with exhaustion. The day had been intense, frightening, and exhilarating, but it had also proven to her that courage and careful observation could change the course of events. That night, as Clara lay awake in her small room, she reflected on what had happened. She had stepped beyond the limits of her shyness, acted decisively, and saved a life. The experience had shown her that bravery was not about loud gestures or grand actions. It was about paying attention, thinking carefully, and acting when it mattered most. And for the first time, she felt that her quiet nature was not a weakness but a strength, one that allowed her to notice things others missed and to act with wisdom and courage. The morning sun rose slowly over Dry Creek, casting a warm, golden light across the quiet town. The events of the previous day had left Clara restless, her mind still racing with thoughts of the bandits and Ethan Parker. She knew that their brief encounter with danger had been only the beginning. There were still threats lurking nearby, and she could not allow him to face them unprepared. For Clara, the day ahead was no longer ordinary. It was a day where courage would be tested, and where quiet observation alone would not suffice. She had learned that action, intelligence, and quick thinking would be required to ensure safety. Ethan, meanwhile, had spent the night reflecting on the previous day's events. He could not stop thinking about Clara, the quiet girl from the general store who had acted so decisively, guiding him to safety. He felt a mixture of awe and gratitude. For someone so shy and reserved, she had demonstrated an incredible understanding of danger, an ability to analyze the situation, and the courage to act when it mattered most. Ethan resolved to remain alert and follow her lead, trusting that her instincts were sharper than anyone else's in the town. By mid-morning, Clara left the general store, making her way carefully toward the outskirts of Dry Creek. She had planned her actions meticulously, considering every possible movement of the bandits and every potential path Ethan might take. Her mind was alert, her senses heightened, and her determination stronger than ever. As she approached the trail leading to the hills, she noticed Ethan waiting by his horse, looking tense but determined. He nodded to her, silently acknowledging her presence and the role she would play in the day ahead. Together they rode carefully along the winding path, moving slowly but purposefully. Clara remained slightly ahead, her sharp eyes scanning for any movement that might indicate danger. Ethan followed closely, trusting her guidance. The wind whispered through the tall grasses, carrying with it the distant sounds of rustling leaves and shifting rocks. Clara knew that the bandits could be hiding anywhere, waiting for a chance to strike. She remained calm, using every skill she had developed over the past days to keep both herself and Ethan safe. As they moved further along the path, Clara spotted the bandits again, this time positioned in a narrow gorge that Ethan would have to pass through. She quickly assessed the situation. There were more of them than yesterday, and they seemed better prepared. Panic tried to creep in, but Clara forced it back, replacing fear with careful planning. She whispered instructions to Ethan, guiding him toward a safer path that wound around the gorge rather than through it. His trust in her grew with every word, every gesture, every subtle signal she gave. Clara realized that a direct confrontation with the bandits would be too dangerous. Instead, she needed to create distractions, divide their attention, and give Ethan the opportunity to move safely. She scanned the environment for anything that could help: a loose branch, a pile of stones, a sudden sound that could divert the bandits' focus. Her mind worked quickly, connecting every detail she had observed, every subtle clue she had noticed, into a strategy that could save a life. She decided to act first, creating a diversion that would draw the bandits' attention away from Ethan. Clara found a large, hollow log near the edge of the path. With careful effort, she positioned it so that it would roll down the slope when she nudged it. Timing was critical. She waited until Ethan was in position, then gave the log a gentle push. It tumbled down the hill with a loud crash, startling the bandits and drawing their eyes away from the main trail. Shouts and exclamations echoed through the gorge, and Clara felt a surge of hope. The plan was working. Ethan took advantage of the moment, guiding his horse with careful precision along the alternate path Clara had chosen. The terrain was rough, but her detailed knowledge of the area allowed her to direct him safely. Clara remained alert, watching for any movement from the bandits, ready to intervene again if necessary. The combination of her intelligence, courage, and careful observation created a situation where Ethan could move with confidence, even in the midst of danger. The bandits, realizing that their initial trap had been disrupted, began to regroup, shouting in frustration. Clara knew she had only bought Ethan a small window of opportunity, not complete safety. She needed to maintain the distraction long enough for him to reach an area where he could defend himself more effectively. Spotting a narrow creek further ahead, she knew that the bandits would be slowed by the rough terrain if Ethan reached it first. She created another distraction by knocking over a small stack of rocks on a nearby slope, sending a cascade of noise that echoed through the gorge. The bandits' attention shifted again, giving Ethan the advantage he needed. As they moved through the creek, Ethan finally looked at Clara, his eyes wide with admiration and relief. He realized that her intelligence, courage, and quick thinking had saved his life not once, but twice in a matter of hours. Clara, though shy and reserved, had acted decisively when it mattered most. Her quiet nature had allowed her to observe, analyze, and respond in ways that others could not. For Ethan, the experience was humbling. He had always relied on his strength and wealth, but now he understood that courage came in many forms, and that Clara's bravery had made all the difference. The bandits, frustrated and disoriented, tried to pursue them, but the terrain slowed their movements. Clara and Ethan continued moving, navigating the hills and rocky paths with care. Clara remained alert, her mind focused on every possible scenario, every potential danger. She realized that the bandits might attempt one last ambush, but she was prepared. She guided Ethan through hidden paths and safe passages, using her knowledge of the landscape to maintain their advantage. Her courage had grown with each action, and she felt a newfound confidence in her abilities. Eventually, they reached a safer area, a small clearing surrounded by trees and rocks that provided cover. Clara signaled for Ethan to stop, and they dismounted, breathing heavily but relieved. The immediate danger had passed, and they took a moment to catch their breath. Ethan looked at Clara, his expression a mixture of gratitude, admiration, and awe. "I can't believe what you've done," he said softly. "You saved my life, Clara. I don't know how to thank you." Clara smiled shyly, feeling a warmth of pride and satisfaction. "You don't need to thank me," she replied gently. "I just couldn't stand by while something happened to you." For Clara, the day had been a turning point. She had faced danger directly, relied on her intelligence and quick thinking, and acted with courage despite her natural shyness. Her actions had saved a life, and she had discovered a strength within herself that she had never known. The experience had changed her, showing her that being quiet and observant was not a weakness, but a form of power that allowed her to act wisely and decisively when it mattered most. As they began the journey back to Dry Creek, Ethan spoke quietly to Clara, expressing his gratitude and admiration. He realized that she was not just a shy girl from the general store, but a person of remarkable intelligence, courage, and insight. For the first time, he understood that true strength came in many forms, and that Clara's quiet bravery had proven more effective than his wealth or his experience in the Wild West. Clara listened, feeling a sense of pride and humility. She had acted not for recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. By the time they reached the edge of the town, the sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the streets and buildings. The townsfolk were unaware of the events that had unfolded, going about their evening routines with their usual cheer. Clara and Ethan dismounted near the general store, taking a moment to reflect on the day's events. Ethan's horse was tired but unharmed, and both of them felt a sense of relief. The danger had passed, thanks to Clara's courage and intelligence. That night, Clara lay in her small room, reflecting on the experiences of the past 2 days. She realized that she had grown in ways she had never expected. Her careful observation, quiet nature, and intelligence had allowed her to face real danger, protect someone in need, and act decisively when it mattered most. For the first time, she felt that her shyness was not a limitation, but a strength that had enabled her to think clearly, act wisely, and make a difference in the world around her. Ethan, too, reflected on the day, recognizing the extraordinary bravery of Clara. He felt a deep sense of respect and gratitude, understanding that she had saved his life through careful observation, intelligence, and courage. Their bond, forged in the heat of danger, was stronger than anything either of them had anticipated. Clara's quiet strength had proven invaluable, and Ethan realized that he had found not just a friend, but a true ally in the unpredictable world of the Wild West. The morning after the close call with the bandits, Dry Creek woke to its usual quiet charm. The sun rose over the dusty streets, casting long shadows that stretched across the wooden storefronts and empty pathways. To the townsfolk, it was just another ordinary day, and yet for Clara, everything had changed. The events of the past days had revealed a side of herself she had never fully recognized. Her quiet observation, careful thinking, and courage had not only saved a life, but had shown her the strength she possessed within. Clara stepped outside her small home, feeling the crisp morning air brush against her face. She had spent the night reflecting on what had happened, and a sense of calm determination settled over her. While she remained shy by nature, she knew that the townspeople would soon see the significance of her actions. They might have ignored her warnings at first, but they would not be able to overlook the truth any longer. She made her way to the general store, her steps steady, her heart light with a quiet confidence. Ethan Parker was already there, waiting by his horse near the edge of town. He had spent the night reflecting as well, thinking about the girl who had risked her safety to protect him. His admiration for Clara had only grown stronger, and he was determined to acknowledge her courage in a way that went beyond mere words. When Clara approached, he tipped his hat politely, his usual confident demeanor softened by genuine respect. "Clara," he said, his voice calm but filled with sincerity, "I cannot thank you enough for what you did. You saved my life." Clara blushed slightly, lowering her eyes in her usual shy manner. "It wasn't anything extraordinary," she murmured. "I just noticed what others didn't. I wanted to help." Her words, gentle as they were, carried the weight of her bravery. She had acted decisively when it mattered most, and now, for the first time, she could accept that her actions were significant. Ethan smiled, understanding that her humility was part of the remarkable character that had made her so brave. As the day progressed, the townsfolk began to notice subtle changes. Stories started spreading, quiet whispers at first, then conversations in the saloon and at the general store. People spoke of the close encounter in the hills, of Ethan Parker's narrow escape, and of the girl who had intervened. At first, many were skeptical, unable to reconcile the image of the shy, quiet Clara with the daring hero described in the tales. But the evidence was undeniable. Ethan himself spoke to the townsfolk, recounting how Clara had created distractions, guided him to safety, and acted with intelligence and bravery that no one else could have matched. The town slowly began to recognize Clara's courage. Neighbors who had once overlooked her now approached her with smiles and words of admiration. "We should have listened," one merchant admitted. "You were right all along." Children, who had once barely noticed her, gathered around, eager to hear her story and see the girl who had saved a wealthy cowboy's life. Clara, though still reserved, felt a warmth of pride and belonging she had never experienced before. Her quiet nature had allowed her to act thoughtfully, and now that action had brought her respect and recognition. Ethan remained close by, observing the town's reaction with a mixture of relief and admiration. He understood the significance of Clara's bravery, not just in the physical danger she had helped him avoid, but in the intelligence and foresight she had demonstrated. Her careful observation, her attention to detail, and her courage had changed the course of events. For Ethan, this was more than gratitude. It was a growing respect, a recognition that Clara was a person of extraordinary character. He found himself wanting to know her better, to understand the depth of her thoughts, and to acknowledge the quiet strength she possessed. Clara's bond with Ethan deepened as the day went on. He asked her questions about the terrain, the bandits, and her careful planning, listening attentively to her explanations. She spoke quietly, describing the observations she had made, the decisions she had taken, and the moments when she had acted to ensure his safety. Ethan marveled at her intelligence and composure. He realized that her shyness had never been a weakness. Rather, it had allowed her to notice details that others missed and to act with wisdom and courage when the situation demanded it. By afternoon, Clara and Ethan had walked through the town together, recounting the events to the townsfolk in careful detail. The story captivated everyone, highlighting Clara's bravery and quick thinking. The people of Dry Creek, who had initially ignored her warnings, now looked at her with newfound respect. Even the children who once ran past her without a glance now followed her, asking questions and seeking her attention. Clara, though shy, smiled softly, realizing that her actions had inspired others and had shown them that courage could come in quiet, unexpected forms. Ethan, impressed by her humility and intelligence, spoke with Clara privately later in the day. "Clara," he said gently, "I've faced many challenges in my life, but I've never met someone like you. You have a bravery and insight that cannot be measured by wealth or strength. I want you to know how much I respect you." Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest. She had never thought of herself as remarkable, but Ethan's words reminded her that her quiet courage had truly made a difference. She nodded softly, realizing that the world often underestimated the strength of those who were shy or reserved. As evening approached, the town of Dry Creek settled into its usual rhythm, but there was a subtle change in the air. People moved with a renewed sense of appreciation for Clara, recognizing that courage and intelligence could be found in unexpected places. Clara herself felt transformed. She had faced danger, acted decisively, and saved a life, all while remaining true to her quiet and observant nature. She realized that bravery did not require loud declarations or dramatic gestures. It required careful thought, keen observation, and the willingness to act when it mattered most. The sun dipped behind the hills, casting long shadows over the town. Clara walked home slowly, reflecting on the events of the past few days. She had discovered a strength within herself that she had never known existed. Her shyness no longer felt like a limitation, but rather a tool that had allowed her to notice details others missed, to think clearly under pressure, and to act with courage. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that her actions had saved Ethan and changed the perception of those around her. Ethan, meanwhile, returned to his ranch at the edge of town, thinking about Clara and the extraordinary qualities she had shown. He knew that he would never forget the quiet girl who had saved his life with intelligence, courage, and careful planning. Her actions had left an impression not only on him, but also on the entire town. He resolved to remain close to her, to learn from her insight, and to ensure that her bravery was never overlooked again. Over the following days, Clara continued her work at the general store, but life was no longer quite the same. The townsfolk now treated her with respect, seeking her advice and appreciating her observations. Children gathered around, eager to hear her stories, while adults listened with newfound attention. Clara remained shy, but she had gained confidence in her abilities. She understood that quiet strength could inspire, protect, and make a real difference in the world. Her bond with Ethan grew stronger as well, rooted in mutual respect, trust, and gratitude. The story of the shy girl who saved the wealthy cowboy spread beyond Dry Creek, reaching neighboring towns and travelers along the trails. Clara became known as someone who combined intelligence, observation, and courage in a way that few could match. Yet she remained humble, never seeking recognition or praise. Her bravery had been motivated by a desire to protect, to do what was right, and to act when others could not. This humility, combined with her extraordinary courage, made her a quiet hero in the hearts of all who knew her story. As the sun set over the hills, Clara sat quietly by the window of her small home, watching the town below. She felt a sense of peace and accomplishment. She had faced danger, acted with intelligence and courage, and earned the respect of a town that once overlooked her. She had also formed a bond with Ethan, built on trust, gratitude, and shared experience. Clara realized that true bravery came not from loud gestures or dramatic acts, but from careful observation, thoughtful action, and the courage to step forward when it mattered most. In the days that followed, Clara continued her life in Dry Creek, but with a quiet confidence that was impossible to miss. She walked through the town with her head held a little higher, helped her neighbors with renewed determination, and continued to observe and understand the world around her with sharp eyes and a thoughtful heart. Ethan remained a loyal friend, grateful companion, and constant source of support. Their bond symbolized the meeting of courage and respect, intelligence and trust, humility and admiration, a bond forged in the heat of danger and strengthened by shared experience. Clara's story became a legend in Dry Creek, not because of fame or wealth, but because of her quiet bravery and intelligence. She had proven that even the shyest among us could make a profound difference, that careful observation and thoughtful action could save lives, and that courage could be found in the most unexpected places. The emotional journey of that shy girl, the wealthy cowboy she protected, and the town that came to respect her served as a reminder that true heroism often comes in quiet, powerful ways, and that bravery, intelligence, and kindness could change the course of lives forever.